Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to our webinar on uncovering misconduct and hidden data in the DEP. We're really happy that you've chosen to join us today for the super interesting and I'm sure very educational conversation for you all. So let's go ahead and get started. Just want to introduce myself first. My name is Katrina, and I work on the Halt the Harm network for those of you who may not know me, and I'll be moderating today's session. Some quick housekeeping guidelines for today before we get started. This webinar is going to be recorded and emailed to all registrants, so you'll be able to refer this later, and you'll also be able to share this with others who were not able to get on the webinar today. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can chat Katrina Ledbetter in the chat box if you're joining by computer. It's on the right-hand side on the bottom part of your control panel. And you can also just email info@halttheharm.net as well as another option with any questions in your contact info during the webinar, and we'll have Katrina get back in touch with you to help you troubleshoot. And last but not least, we'll have a very short survey at the end of the webinar to get any feedback that you might have. And we want to make sure to share it with our team and the panelists as well, so we want to keep making these webinars better and better. So the webinar is going to start off with presentations from our panelists today for about 30 to about 40 minutes, and we'll have a Q&A at the end and open discussions with participants and panelists together at the end. So again, we can go over really quick to ask a question, and refer, if you're joining on my computer, refer to the panel dashboard on the right-hand side at the bottom, and you can use the question chat box to send a message to us. And if you're joining by phone and you do have a question or a comment to make, you can email us at info@halttheharm.net, and we'll be fielding that as well throughout the course of the webinar. So now that we've got that out of the way, we've got two really great speakers today. I'm super lucky to have both Melissa Troutman and Sierra Shamer of Public Herald. A little bit about Melissa. Melissa is a journalist and documentary filmmaker who co-founded the investigative news nonprofit Public Herald in 2011, where she currently serves as the executive director. And Sierra Shamer is a geographer, community organizer, and investigative journalist working and living in central Pennsylvania. Sierra is also an organizer with Shale Field Organizing Committee, a small grassroots organization working with communities in central PA, and a data journalist at Public Herald. Very quick about Halt the Harm for those of you who may not know on this call. Halt the Harm is an emerging advocacy network designed to connect, serve, and support the dedicated individuals and leaders like yourself working to halt the harms caused by fracking. The network's goal is really just to expand and strengthen the base of leaders and supporters in the movement nationwide, and facilitate collaboration by developing services like webinars to equip leaders with the tools and strategies they need to halt the harms of fracking, both in their local communities and ultimately win the fight nationally. Who are the leaders of Halt the Harm, and what does the network consist of? Leaders in the network are individuals who are actively working and collaborating to help those living in communities negatively impacted by fracking. So a leader can really be anyone, whether you're a concerned parent who's organizing other parents at their school against local drilling, or you are someone who is professionally organizing and working for a larger group. And through the network, leaders are able to access free resources and services online, like our leader directory, campaign strategy and support, webinars, again, like this one, and event support, just to name a few of the services that we have through the network. And I just want to share a really quick screenshot of a campaign we worked on last year called Raising Resistance, where we featured a few stories of leaders who had experienced industry intimidation. And really by telling their stories in mixed media forms, we also provided them with a platform to speak about their work, share what they're doing, and what they've done despite industry interference in providing a way for supporters to actively engage and support their work, whether it was leaving them a voicemail, an encouraging note, liking their Facebook page, donating to the organization, or taking action on their local campaigns. So these are just some of the things we're working on this year, but we are always looking for new ideas and suggestions from individuals like yourself. And some of you listening today may already be a leader, but if you're not one yet, you are in luck. So look out for an email from me in the next week or so giving you access to these services, and I'm more than happy to help guide you through the site, the network, and the different services that we have, and talk to you personally. So now I'll hand it over to the speakers to start, and we'll start off with Melissa, who will start our presentation section of the webinar.
Thank you, Parthana. Let me enter full screen here. So hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here to share Public Herald's investigation with you all. And really more than just about data and fracking, this really is an investigation about water. Over the past decade in the United States, the link between fracking and water contamination has been a very blurry one, obfuscated, of course, by industry trade groups whose mantra has been, fracking has never contaminated drinking water, and also by government regulators who've been less than transparent, I'll say, about the risks that fracking poses to drinking water. This is an image of a woman who lives in Potter County, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, whose water was very clearly contaminated by oil and gas operations about 400 feet from her water well. And even though DEP saw illegal activity on the part of the gas company and saw the contamination in her water, they used a loophole in the Oil and Gas Act to leave her case off the book and essentially dismiss it. She's certainly not alone, and since 2011, when Public Herald first embarked on this journey, it's come to be a 5-year investigation to find out just how much of a risk fracking is to drinking water. Which is, of course, good to know if you're living near fracking or downstream from fracking, and it's also prudent for researchers or water purveyors, government officials whose duty it is to provide safe drinking water to millions of people. Unfortunately, as you'll see by the end of this webinar, there are some public officials in Pennsylvania particularly who have chosen to ignore these risks and actually keep them hidden. So, how did we go about this? Well, we began by asking a very simple question. How much drinking water has been contaminated by unconventional oil and gas operations, aka fracking? Considering that the Department of Environmental Protection here in Pennsylvania actually keeps a list of confirmed water contamination cases on its website, it seems like this would be an easy question to answer. However, according to DEP and their online list, there are 284 drinking water supplies that have been impacted by oil and gas. So that's it, right? The number's 284, and if only 284 water supplies have been impacted by oil and gas, well, out of tens of thousands of oil and gas wells, maybe the risk isn't that big. The problem here, of course, is that DEP's list is inaccurate and it's definitely misleading. How do we know this? We know this because Public Herald spent 3 years canvassing residents living near well sites. We also spent that time collecting DEP's water complaint records, which, when analyzed, reveal a very different picture that includes many more contamination cases than DEP is disclosing. At first, the state did not want to give us these records, specifically complaint records. They classified them as confidential. And when I asked why, one of DEP's attorneys told me it was because the department didn't want the complaints to, quote, cause alarm, end quote. And this, of course, made it all the more important to get the records. So with some persistent bulldogging, we finally got access to them. But they came at us in a very slow trickle because, according to the DEP, we, Public Herald, we were the first people to see these records in aggregate form And there actually wasn't an aggregate of complaint records yet. DEP was essentially creating it for our request. And DEP had to redact all of the personal information out of each and every page. So that took a long time. There were also far more complaint records than we had imagined, thousands and thousands more. So once we had the records, we analyzed them for an investigative report, and also we mapped them for public use and accessibility. But before we get into the nitty-gritty about the report, I think we should talk about what a complaint record actually is. And for that, I'm going to pitch it over to Sierra.
All right, thank you, Melissa. So what is a DEP citizen complaint record? So complaints are basically the 911 calls by residents to the DEP. If you're living near oil and gas infrastructure and experience property damage, air quality issues, or drinking water contamination, or if you witness an emergency situation, you can call DEP's oil and gas office and request an investigation. The DEP records these complaints, assigns each one a number, and is required by law to investigate them within a specified time. So we have an example record here to show you. A typical complaint record includes a description of the original phone call and the DEP inspector's responses to that call. They can also include well inspection reports, drinking water test results, email correspondence between DEP and industry representatives, or a determination letter stating a conclusion of their investigation. So if you scroll through a complaint record like this one, you see a determination letter here. You see a water sample report, a few pages of those, another determination, or maybe a copy of the same one, another water sample here. And each complaint record can include different things. Sometimes they're only one page with very little information, and sometimes they could be hundreds of pages depending on the extent of the investigation and the quality of DEP's record keeping. So over the past 3 years, Public Herald has been able to scan almost 7,000 of these complaint records provided by DEP's oil and gas office. Over time, this number grew and grew, and we came to realize that some records were missing. To verify this, we requested a list of all the complaints that DEP had registered in their database beginning in 2004. On the last business day of 2016, DEP provided us that list, revealing a total of 9,442 oil and gas complaint records. Of these complaints, 4,108 were specifically about drinking water contamination. So to help us analyze all this data, we had the help of expert scientists Dr. John Stoltz of Duquesne University and Dr. Tony Ingraffia at Cornell. To them and to us, this data set was shocking, and we decided to break it down a bit to understand how it fit into the story of oil and gas development in Pennsylvania. So this graph here shows the number of unconventional hydraulically fractured wells drilled each year from 2004 to 2016. That line is the green line that you see. As fracking increases, so does the number of citizen complaints. That is the red line that you see. The blue line is the number of complaints specifically related to drinking water. So this graph shows that there's a direct relationship between unconventional wells drilled and a rise in complaints. But what other factors could explain this trend? So we decided to add to the graph the data by year for conventional oil and gas wells, those that are not hydraulically fractured. And it was clear that they did not explain the rise in citizen complaints. In fact, at the same time complaints were increasing, conventional wells in Pennsylvania were decreasing dramatically. And you can see that with the yellow line in this graph. Other factors, such as road salts, agricultural runoff, and the fact that private water wells are not regulated, have been all used to explain away these complaints. However, these other factors have been relatively consistent over time and would not explain the trends and the increases shown in this graph. So what does this all mean? Basically, the relationship between complaints and fracking wells is widespread across the state, across the shale gas regions of Pennsylvania, from the southwest to the northeast. With over 10,000 unconventional wells and 9,400 complaints, the ratio of complaints per well is almost 1-to-1. Having this data mapped helps people see what impacts may have occurred near them, and it can alert them to a need that they might have to have their water tested. Over the past 4 years, DEP has received an average of 3 oil and gas complaints per business day. At this rate, with 100,000 wells, DEP, if we drilled 100,000 wells, DEP could be responding to an average of 30 complaints related to fracking every day. The projected rise in complaints would likely place a huge financial burden on DEP's shoulders, a burden carried under the weight of a decreasing budget and a legal mandate to permit new wells. In fact, since 2004, the agency has permitted 21,980 unconventional wells, but to date, only half have been drilled. So it would be reasonable to think that the department would conduct its own complaint analysis and report those findings to the state legislature, which has the power to either limit the expansion of fracking or increase the breadth of DEP's resources so they could handle all of this work. But that's not what DEP is doing. So part of why our complaint database is so important is because for the first time in the state's history, the public has access to these records, and they reveal the truth about the risk of oil and gas. There's currently no notification system for informing private well owners when contamination has occurred near them, and we've talked to dozens of families who were unaware of pollution that occurred within a mile from their own water well. We also know that contamination can spread way further than 1 mile and impact areas in a whole region. So from our website, the public can download any complaint record and use it to educate elected officials, inform their neighbors, and inform other people. So this makes the complaint map and database an empowering tool that puts information in the hands of the people, whereas before it was kept behind closed doors in state offices. So now I'm going to turn it over to Melissa again, and she's going to walk you through how to use our complaint database.
Thanks, Sierra. All right, so in order to use the complaint database, first step, you simply want to open your browser and visit publicfiles.org/complaints, and we'll be giving you these web addresses after the webinar, so have no fear. You don't have to write furiously. So by visiting publicfiles.org/complaints, you get to the web page you see now on your screen if you're joining us with your computer. On the left-hand side, you will see a column of tabs, but for this, we're just going to focus in on complaints where we already are. So once you have this, the complaint site up, there you're going to see a statewide map, and if you could just simply click on that map, it will bring the map full screen on your computer. And once that full screen map loads, on the left you will see a key to the colors that you will see on the map. Now the map is a, well, I don't want to call it beautiful, but it is an array of colors from like peach to red to purple to black, and these colors correspond to the amount of complaints in each municipality. The darker the color, the more complaints. A couple things about navigating the map. To move the map around, you can just click and hold on the map and drag it around. You can also use the plus and minus symbols on the upper left to zoom in and out. And to see a specific, the records for a specific municipality, you can do one of two things. You can simply click on a municipality, and I'm going to zone in, for this example, I'm going to zone in on Potter County in north central Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. You can simply click on a municipality, and up will pop a dialog box, which gives you some basic information. That information includes the name of the municipality, the name of the county that it's in, and a rundown of the numbers for the types of complaints that have been registered by DEP for that county. Now the other thing you can do is you can search for a specific address. So you can put in your home address, you can put in the address of school, nursing home, whatever you want. For this example, I'm going to put in the address of Charles Cole Memorial Hospital, which is in Coudersport, Pennsylvania, and which is actually leased for fracking. It's one of the few, maybe the only hospital I know of that has actually leased with a fracking company to frack their property. So if you search by a specific address, it'll zoom really close into that address, and you can see this is the hospital, very up close. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit just to get a frame of reference. And then by clicking in the township that surrounds this address, it pops that same dialog box, which tells us that the Charles Cole Memorial Hospital is in Eulalia Township in Potter County and has a total of 6 complaints, oil and gas related complaints, that have been registered with the department. Now, if you want to look at the actual records, that's very easy to do. In your dialog box, kind of at the top on the right, you will see a link that says More Info. And by clicking that link, up will pop the web page for the all of the complaints in the particular county that you're in at the moment. So we're in Potter County. So now we're seeing all this. We're seeing the page for Potter County complaints. And if you scroll down, all of the complaints for that county will be listed and organized by township. So Charles Cole is in Eulalia Township. So I've scrolled down to Eulalia Township, and you can see that all 6 all 6 complaints are here. And by clicking on one, up pops the complaint. And like Sierra mentioned earlier, there's a host of information in these complaint records. The complaint number, the township, the date that DEP received the complaint, a description of the complaint. In this case, the complainant has called DEP requesting a sample of their water supply due to a discharge of an unapproved surfactant by JKLM Energy, who contaminated groundwater in Potter County back in 2015. So this complaint is related to that groundwater contamination cluster. So you might want to do more than just look at a complaint. If you want to download or print the complaint, you can do so by, if you look on the right-hand side of the complaint document screen, at the top you will see a link that says Original Document PDF. So if you click on that original document link, it will take you to the PDF version of that document. Now in my browser, in the upper right-hand corner, I have icons, the little printer icon that I can click and then print it out at home, or it has a download icon where I can actually download the PDF if I want to maybe transfer it to a different computer. You can also simply copy the link to the PDF in your browser and then share that with folks via email if you want to, and they will be taken directly to this original PDF. So that is a basic rundown of the complaint database. And next, we want to share with you a video that we created and published with the part 1 of this investigation. And this video gives sort of an overview of the context and background of part one of the investigation. And if we're ready, Sierra, you can go ahead and get that started. Oh,
actually, I'm just going to interject super quick. Thanks, Melissa. I just wanted to let folks know we've got a few questions in the queue already, and I'm really glad that it shows that folks are listening. But also, if you have a question or something develops along the way, we still have a bit of the presentation left. You don't have to wait until the end. Essentially, you can either raise your hand or you can chat at us in the chat box, and we're keeping the queue of all the questions.
All right. Thank you, Parthena. I'm going to play this video for everyone. Make this full screen here.
Hey, I'm just going to interject super quick, Sierra. I don't think we can see the video play.
Oh, really? Probably because I
can hear you. Maybe.
All right. Can you
let's
see?
Try that again.
Yeah, let's try again. I won't make it full screen this time.
Here, let's try this.
Did you? Oh, yeah.
Here, let me do this. I'll make you presenter one more time. Just a little bit of hiccup. We'll do this really quick. See if that works.
Okay. Can you see that? Can you see that now?
We can see everything. That's great. Yeah.
So I just won't make it bigger.
Perfect.
Okay.
Going deep. You can imagine I was surprised. Shocked is probably a stronger word. And what the data shows quite clearly is that the impact has been systemic. By the time they're done, there will be large regions in the state of Pennsylvania that will be uninhabitable because people won't be able to get clean water. Pennsylvania, you have a line. You have the fracking equipment all up and down that line. In New York, you have nothing. In Pennsylvania, they're driving Cadillacs.
All right. So after we collected all the data and saw the connection between complaints and fracking, we wondered why DEP determined that only 7% of complaints are actually linked to oil and gas operations. Of the 4,108 drinking water complaints, DEP says only 284 water supplies have been contaminated by unconventional drilling. So we asked the questions, why does DEP believe 93% of oil and gas complaints are unrelated, and how did they make these determinations? So to determine why the difference in confirmed cases and overall complaints was so drastic, we reviewed in depth over 1,000 drinking water complaints to see how DEP inspectors and supervisors respond and investigate them. All right, so while many of these records were lacking information, we were able to identify 178 records with enough information that clearly showed official misconduct of DEP personnel. These include instances where DEP inspectors break the law, refusing to investigate complaints, ignoring contamination in water, and failing to disclose all the confirmed cases of contamination that are known. Within Part 2 of our report, we feature this spreadsheet, which details each case of DEP misconduct that we identified. So to walk you through this spreadsheet, this is publicly available on a report. The spreadsheet has 3 tabs. At the bottom here, cases of misconduct, hidden positive determinations, and then a list of DEP oil and gas contacts. So for this first tab, you can see that we have columns at the top, DEP region. So in this case, it is the North Central Regional Office. DEP has oil and gas offices around the state. It tells you the county, township, the complaint number, the date that DEP received the complaint, the date that they first responded to the complaint, and the date that the complaint was resolved. It also tells you who the inspector and supervisors responsible for investigating the complaint were. So in this case, it's Brendan Logan and Jeremy Daniel. It provides a link to the complaint file in our database that you can view. You can view the actual document. And most importantly, it provides a description of the type of misconduct that we've identified in that case. So the type of misconduct is in 3 parts, or it can be divided into 3 categories. The first is malfeasance, which is directly breaking the law. The second is misfeasance, where DEP follows the law, but they investigate wrongfully. And then the third is negligence, which is careless behavior. So I can just provide you with a few examples of this. We scroll down. So the first example I've selected is case number 284102, and this is a malfeasance case. So in this situation, DEP makes a determination 3 months after the complaint is called in. DEP wants to wait until the operator investigates and finds out what their results are. The water sample shows elevated sodium, chloride, and conductivity, and those elevated parameters are usually indicative of a brine spill or a frac water waste spill. Also, methane, bromide, barium, strontium, and other parameters were elevated. However, DEP says oil and gas wasn't to blame in this case, and says that the pre-drill, or the water sample that was taken before drilling activity, was similar to the post-drill results. However, the data isn't in the document, or isn't in the complaint record to support that claim. In this case, case number 303717, this is also a malfeasance case. In this case, the complainant calls in, and DEP says, we're not going to investigate your complaint because we investigated it in 2013 and determined that oil and gas wasn't to blame. So even though it's a different year, it's a different situation, DEP says, no, we're not going to investigate. We're just going to send you the letter we sent you in 2013. And finally, in this case, 281502, also a malfeasance situation. DEP samples the water, they ignore the pre-drilling samples, and they wait 2.5 years to make a final determination. When they do make the determination, they tell the landowner or the resident that the levels of methane found in their well were a background condition, but they don't talk about other parameters like arsenic, aluminum, and iron as an issue. Another thing to note about this case is that the operator actually installed a water well vent to help remove some of the methane from the well. However, this in itself did not indicate to DEP that the operator was to blame at all for this. So you can look through all of these. These are just our summaries, and again, if you want to look at the specifics of the case, you can click the document and read all of that for yourself. So then in the second tab, we have the 49 cases where DEP said, yes, the oil and gas company did contaminate your water, and we did send you a positive determination, but for some reason, these 49 cases are not included in DEP's public list online. So some of these cases are, some people don't have well water, they may have a spring. This spring right here was impacted with brine, frac water waste, on the same day that the frac job had occurred. This case is also another spring contaminated with brine. In these cases here, all of these wells had elevated minerals due to drilling in the neighborhood. We have methane, iron, and manganese here, methane in the water here, and so on. Now, some of these we don't have documents for, like in these cases, and then others we do. So in the cases where we have the document, you can click that and then you can view it. And then finally, in our third tab, we have the oil and gas contacts for each of the regional offices of DEP, so that if you were so inclined, you could call them up and say, hey, I'm curious about this case, or I'm curious about Public Herald's report. You know, do you have anything to say about that? So basically, this spreadsheet is our body of evidence detailing DEP's misconduct, and it provides a template for further investigation. And now that we have shown you this, Melissa is going to talk about the current effort to hold DEP accountable.
Thank you, Sierra. Man, every time I see that spreadsheet again, I'm just like all over again blown away at some of the stuff in there. But anyway, so part 2 of our investigation deals with DEP misconduct, but it also deals with accountability. You know, finding all of these problems is one thing, but then, you know, what happens next? So when we were working through this data, we ended up speaking with a couple different attorneys, and not specifically about all of these cases, but just about their experiences. And one of the attorneys we spoke with was John Smith, who is one of the attorneys responsible for getting the unconstitutional parts of Pennsylvania's Oil and Gas Act 13 overturned. And something that John said to us was, you know, what happens if DEP doesn't do their job? I wrestle with this all the time because in my cases, they don't do their job. Are they financially benefiting from it, or is it just pure dereliction of duty? And if it is, who is responsible for policing them? And so this was a question that we had as well. When DEP officials break the law, don't uphold the law, who holds them accountable? Because, you know, the residents of Pennsylvania and the drinking water we depend on is in the hands of the DEP. And if they're breaking the law, then what do we do? Surely somebody can do something, and we don't have to just sit back and watch the number of people harmed keep climbing and climbing with no recourse or any sort of justice. You might remember the situation in Flint, Michigan. And when state regulators in Michigan failed to do their duties, during the Flint water crisis, Michigan's Attorney General brought criminal charges against those officials for misconduct. The image you see on the screen, if you're with us on your computer, shows the image of a woman who was head of the Michigan DEQ's drinking water program. So and Michigan's Department of Environmental Quality is the equivalent to our DEP here in Pennsylvania. And the Michigan Attorney General brought several felony and misdemeanor charges against several people at the DEQ, but this one in particular was a felony for misconduct in office and a misdemeanor for willful neglect of duty. And the crimes that this individual committed were a failure to take corrective actions or notify public health officials despite receiving citizen complaints and being aware of pollution and health problems. She also took steps to mislead and conceal evidence. Now, in Pennsylvania, our situation is a little different, but what's happening inside of the DEP is essentially the same thing. They're aware of citizen complaints, many of which involve health problems. And not only are they failing to take corrective actions, but they're also not revealing this evidence to the public. So in Pennsylvania, our Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, campaigned on a promise to protect the public from the oil and gas industry. Now, in this case, it's DEP officials themselves who are breaking state laws and therefore leaving families out to dry without clean drinking water. Now, as a result of our investigation, hundreds of people have called Shapiro's office, and we've called too, and we've sent additional follow-up questions since this investigation came out. Now, full disclosure, I voted for Shapiro, and I'm sorry to say that he hasn't really said anything about this investigation. He hasn't issued a statement. And so what do we do at this point? Well, one of my favorite quotes is, you deserve what you tolerate. And the next question is the public going to tolerate criminal behavior on the part of its public officials? So a couple things you can do. Whether or not you live in Pennsylvania, this issue affects you. Pennsylvania is the second largest producer of natural gas behind Texas, and that's a big deal for climate change. So one thing you can do is you can call the Office of the Attorney General, and the number is here on the screen. We'll also provide it after the webinar. Call him, ask him what he plans to do with the body of evidence in our report, and ask him to open an investigation of the DEP. Another thing you can do, and this is a good idea because it creates a written record, and it might even get you a letter sent back, is to send a certified letter to the Attorney General's office. And we have the address up for you here. Now, it's also important to engage your state and federal representatives on this. Write to them. Ask them to read Public Herald's reports and provide the links if you need to. Ask your state and federal elected representatives to contact Attorney General Shapiro and ask him what he plans to do about the crimes at DEP, because he has the authority and he has the responsibility, and as far as we can tell, there's no one else that can hold DEP accountable. Now, I'm going to let Sierra chime in about a very exciting thing in Maryland, and then we'll finish up and do some Q&A. So Sierra, do you want to hit that real quick?
Sure, thanks. I just want to add real quick some good news. So in Maryland on Monday, the legislators voted overwhelmingly to ban fracking in the state, making Maryland the first state in the country who has oil and gas resources, but who has never fracked them and then has moved to ban them. And it's pretty significant because we do have a Republican governor now who also supported the ban. And a couple weeks ago, Public Herald was invited to testify to the Senate committee where this bill came out of. We were invited by the senator who introduced the bill in order to share this report. And unfortunately, we have not been asked by any legislators in Pennsylvania to talk about our report, and that's one of the other reasons why it's very important for the public to reach out, because like in Maryland, these things do make a difference. And now we have Pennsylvania, which is bordered by New York, who has banned fracking, and Maryland, who has also banned fracking. And I'll turn it back to you, Melissa, for the last quote.
Right. So, you know, for those of us living in Pennsylvania, this can all seem very overwhelming. And I just wanted to share this quote from Gandhi as a little, hopefully a little bit of a pick-me-up. You know, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Prarthana so we can do some Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa and Sierra, both for that. And Melissa, thank you so much for ending that on that note. I think it is a positive note, but also an encouraging note for us to keep fighting. And I just want to say that was super comprehensive and thorough, and it's very clear that you both and the rest of your team have dedicated a ton of time on this. So thank you so much for this. So we'll go ahead and move to the Q&A portion of today's webinar. We've got a ton of things in the queue, so thank you so much for everyone in advance for participating. Go ahead and jump right in since we don't have a ton of time. But all of these questions actually aren't really directed towards either one of you guys, Melissa or Sierra, so I'm assuming both you guys can tag team, and that's been the best way possible in the way that you guys did the presentation. So first off, first question from Carolyn Knapp. The question is, with the permitting of new injection wells and the existence of some in the past, how does the DEP record and handle these complaints, and are they subject to the same oil and gas laws as production wells?
I'll hit that very quickly. We have not specifically really dug into injection wells, although we are following the fights going on in communities like Grant Township in Indiana County and Highland Township in Elk County, who have been trying to keep this out of their communities in order to protect their water. Injection wells are permitted by both the Department of Environmental Protection and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and they are subject to a different set of rules and regulations than production wells for a variety of reasons. And DEP has just permitted, just on Monday, they permitted 2 new wastewater injection wells in Grant Township and Highland Township in western Pennsylvania. And I also read that they have, I think it's about a dozen other permits for injection wells that they're sitting on. So you might think, okay, well, there's 2 layers of regulations here on injection wells, so maybe that'll be a little better. But we know from investigations done by newsrooms like ProPublica that 1 in 6 injection wells has construction failures. And that means that well there's a vulnerability that that waste disposal well will leak into the surrounding area and potentially contaminate drinking water. And that's why communities like Grant Township and Highland Township, the folks there are fighting so hard to keep them out.
Great. So we can move into the next question. The next question is from Jenny Lisak. The question is, will this work be ongoing? And do you know if anyone from Wolf's office has looked at this data?
This is ongoing. We have, so there's a few different places to take this next. One thing we'd like to do is to aggregate the complaints that specifically mention health problems and create an aggregate of that, because as folks might know, Governor Wolf has failed to create a health registry for folks experiencing health problems related to fracking development. And so by creating an aggregate out of these complaints, we think that that'll be the first data set of health-related fracking complaints that we can actually see and that public health officials and the like can start digging into and analyzing. That is just one of a whole laundry list of other places and other stories that are going to come out of this data. We also want to start collecting complaints on an annual or biannual basis. And to be perfectly honest, that depends on funding for us, because like we mentioned, this is an incredibly long process. And, you know, props to Sierra for joining the team and sticking through this, and she was such a valuable member because it's really hard work. I mean, it's like scratch your eyes out work. So yes, we're definitely going to continue this, and no, we have not heard anything from Governor Wolf's office. We have sent it to him. We've tried to make him aware. We've tried to sit down and meet with him on several occasions, and those requests have been declined.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I think that's a really great question. So next we got from Lisa Graves Marcucci. And this question was in particular to, I think, when Sierra was presenting the spreadsheet that started with cases of misconduct, and I think there was a second one. So her question was, how do we navigate to this particular page within the website, and is it accessible to the public?
Sierra, you want to take that?
Sure. So the cases of misconduct spreadsheet is within our Part 2 report. So there's a link to the Part 2 report that you can click it in. I'm not exactly sure. It might even be in there more than once, but that is where you can access it. But we could also provide the direct link to that at the end of this as well. I think that would be good.
Great. Yes, and I do want to reiterate and repeat what both Melissa and Sarah have said, is that we will be providing as many links and as we can that were presented in the webinar today in a follow-up email tomorrow. So the next question we have here is from Larry Wilk. The question is, the conclusions you draw are based on the number of complaints, not on testing data of water quality before and after fracking. So, could social factors account for the increase in the number of complaints? That is, the public knowledge that fracking is occurring and that fracking might cause water quality problems might cause more people to look more closely at their water quality than they did before fracking started.
I can answer that question too, Melissa, if that's
Go ahead,
okay.
girl.
So yeah, so that's of the various reasons that, or the various factors that people come up with, like road salts and agricultural runoff and things like that. This is another one of those that we didn't address in the presentation. So it's not, in particular, there's several reasons why we think that the social factors don't account for the increase in the number of complaints. One of those is that calling the DEP and having an investigation is actually not a person's first instinct. Many people call the gas company that they know is drilling nearby, and then if that doesn't work, or if they feel like the company hasn't addressed their issues, then they might call DEP. They may also just call their water guy, their well guy, and have the well guy come out and check it out, and they may assume that it's a number of other reasons. And you can actually see evidence of this within the complaints, where people are describing, I've noticed this, 2 months ago, and I tried a number of different things, and then, someone suggested to me, oh, this is, indicative. And then in other cases, it's extremely obvious that, they did a frack job, a spill occurred, and now my water is contaminated. And so you can also see that in the graph that as the number of wells drilled goes down, so too does the number of complaints. And if the issue were a social issue, then you would see the complaints continue to rise over time, regardless of how many wells were drilled each year. So that would be the main points to that question, I think, unless you have anything to add, Melissa.
No, the only thing I want to add is that this data set does need a lot more investigation and research, and one of the reasons we made this data publicly accessible is so that social scientists, for example, can dig in and do their own studies of this data. So that would be great if you know any.
Great. Awesome. And I think that's also a really good question too, and I think it's a critique that's worth discussing, and I thought your guys' answer was great. Thanks so much. So the next question we have is from Andrew Sinclair. I'm sorry, it's Leo Andrew Sinclair. The question is, who can we go to for pre-testing of the wells prior to the construction and post-testing?
Well, That's a good question. And we get that question a lot. We don't have a list of labs. We hesitate to suggest specific labs because we have done that in the past and then learned that that lab has done that 90% of their work is for the oil and gas industry, and you know that a lot of people see that as sort of like a conflict of interest and have some trust issues. So what I suggest though is if you have a local watershed group, you can call and ask them. Mountain Watershed Association in Fayette County usually is really on top of a good list of water testing labs that you can call. And really, technically, any lab that's EPA certified should be able to, you know, unequivocally, unbiasedly come out and test your water, give you the results without any sort of, you know, without any sort of bias or anything, whether or not they work for the industry too.
Yeah, I would also add that the oil and gas companies will do pre-drill testing within a certain distance of their new well, but they don't have to necessarily do that. And there may be other reasons or other activity in the area where it's not really a pre-drill sample, or you don't want the company to do it, you want to trust someone else. So.
And Leah, we can connect with you after the webinar as well if this is something that you'd like more information on. I think Sierra gave a really great shout out to a group that we worked with before as well, and we've got great experience at WA, Mountain Watershed Association. Really, I guess it does also depend on where you live, so we're happy to follow up with you afterwards. So the next question we've got is from Mark Winkle. The question is, has anyone taken a look at Cabot Chemicals, the main producer of fracking chemicals worldwide? They came out with a disclosure that they acknowledged that fracking was not inherently safe.
I have not seen that. Have you, Sierra?
I have not seen that either.
But I will say there are certain companies that are far more transparent than others. And actually, individual companies are becoming more transparent than the industry trade groups. So that doesn't exactly surprise me, especially at this stage in the game. I mean, in Pennsylvania, we're, what, 12, 13 years into this? And there's almost, you know, there's almost 9,500 complaints since fracking really began in Pennsylvania. So there's no more, I don't think they really have, the industry or the trade groups really have the ability anymore to repeat this mantra that they've used in the past, that fracking is completely safe. You know, it's not. And there are certain risks that are associated with, and I'm really happy to see companies who own up to that. That makes me happy.
Great. So we've got time for one last question from Carolyn Knapp, who actually restarted up questions, so it's a nice circle. The last question is, have you thought about asking people to contact their county and township officials so you can do a presentation and discussion to them?
Good point, Carolyn, and I was going to mention that and I forgot, so thank you for that question. Yes, one of the biggest obstacles, especially for those of us who live in rural areas, is dealing with our local elected officials who might, you know, not to mince words, be blinded by the potential revenues coming into a rural area that might be struggling financially and economically, and not want to talk about the impacts. Well, I would be happy to do a presentation that's specifically geared towards, you know, how to use this data at local supervisors or county commissioner meetings, zoning board hearings, or just within, you know, do presentations for individual organizations or groups that you might have, advocacy groups in your area. But that's a very good point. Print out the data for your specific township or your specific county, take it to your local officials and ask them a bunch of questions. Ask if they've seen the data and ask if they know how much water contamination has taken place and how much they would be willing to allow before they check in with their state representatives or DEP and say, what's up with this? We've had X number of water contamination cases. How many more can there be? So, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, that I agree. That is a wonderful question and a really great question to end on. And Carolyn, we're happy, Halt the Harm is happy to help facilitate and support you if that is something that you're looking to do, or anyone else on the call or the webinar if folks are interested in doing that. I think that's definitely something that we can help facilitate. I think that's a great idea. So thanks everyone so much for joining our webinar today. I think everyone, I can speak for everyone else, all the other presenters, that I thought there was a really good conversation and everyone asked really, really great questions. Just a quick reminder, there is a brief feedback survey coming your way once you exit out of this. It's super short and it's just to let us know how we did and how we can improve, because as you may know, we do these quite often and we want to make sure that we're providing you guys with best quality webinars. Also, if you have a suggestion for the next webinar, we are always looking for suggestions. Just send them to us at info@halttheharm.net. I'm on the other end of that info@halttheharm.net email. It is not a robot, and I'm more than happy to hear your ideas. We are definitely always looking for new ones. And lastly, if you want to learn more, you want to check out both Public Herald and Halt the Harm, you can check us out at our websites here at publicherald.org. and halttheharm.net. And we will be sending a recording of this webinar in addition to other really helpful links to everyone who registered tomorrow, or definitely before the end of the week. So look out for that as well. So thank you everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.